24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. Russian President Vladimir Putin says Moscow would consider any third-party declaration of a no-fly zone over Ukraine as participation in the armed conflict. Speaking this afternoon at an aviation school in Moscow, President Putin said his country would view the intervention as a threat. His comments come as Ukraine's President, Volodymyr Zelensky, pushed NATO to impose a no-fly zone over his country. But the alliance says the move, which would bar all unauthorised aircraft from flying over Ukraine, could provoke widespread war in Europe with Russia. Ukraine and Russia will hold a third round of talks on Monday in a bid to reach an end to the conflict. It comes as the Israeli Prime Minister met with President Putin in Moscow to discuss the Ukraine crisis. Naftali Bennett has offered to mediate between Russia and Ukraine, although officials have previously played down expectations of a breakthrough. The International Monetary Fund says the ongoing war in Ukraine will have a severe impact on the global economy, with significant spillover to other countries. The organisation is warning of serious economic consequences, including surging prices of energy and grain, and that countries with close economic ties to Ukraine and Russia are at particular risk of supply disruptions. It says Ukraine has requested $1.4 billion in emergency money, which is expected to be approved as early as next week. The Ministry of Defence says Russia's proposed ceasefire was likely an attempt to deflect international condemnation whilst regrouping its forces. Moscow had said earlier it had opened humanitarian corridors near the Ukrainian cities of Mariupol and Volnovakha. However, Mariupol's city council claimed Russia was not observing the ceasefire. Earlier, Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister, Irina Vereshchuk, said Russia was thwarting the evacuation plan by not observing the agreement.
As you know, starting from 9 a.m, we had a preliminary agreement to create 2 humanitarian corridors in Volnovakha and Mariupol. I can confirm the fact that Russia violated the agreement in which the Red Cross was an intermediary. It did not fulfill undertaken duties and is shelling the town of Volnovakha. We call on the Russian side to stop shelling, restore ceasefire and allow columns to move along the humanitarian corridor so that children, women and elderly people can leave the towns.
The number of refugees fleeing the Russian invasion could rise to 1.5 million by the end of the weekend. The UN Refugee Agency says the figure stands at 1.3 million and that despite the possibility of humanitarian corridors, the situation remains dire with military action in many places across Ukraine. Speaking in Poland earlier, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has announced further support.
I'll support the needs of Ukrainians in Poland and other countries. The Biden administration just requested to Congress $2.75 billion in humanitarian assistance. That's both to meet the need of vulnerable people and communities inside Ukraine, as well as to support refugee services, including here in Poland.
Antony Blinken speaking there. Well, a Formula One team has sacked its Russian driver following the country's invasion of Ukraine. Nikita Mazepin's contract has been terminated by the American-owned team Haas. The driver says he's disappointed with the decision, but has treasured his time at Formula One. The team also ended its deal with its Russian sponsor Uralkali, owned by Mr. Mazepin's father. Hundreds have marched through central London today demanding an end to men's violence against women. Supporters of the Million Women Rise collective walked from Charing Cross Police Station to Scotland Yard. Their starting point is where racist, misogynistic and homophobic messages were exposed by a police watchdog last month. Many wore red, which they said symbolised the blood of women who've died at the hands of men. They're demanding action from the police to tackle the issue. This is GB News on TV, online and DAB+ radio. We'll have more news for you, of course, at the top of the next hour.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry and clear for many away from eastern and central England. Let's take a look at those details. Zooming into the southwest, and it will be a fine end to the day. It will turn chilly, though, once the sun goes down as skies remain clear. Moving east, and it will be a cloudy and damp evening across southeast England and East Anglia. Winds will be brisk, especially along the coast. We move back into the clear skies across Wales this evening, with just a little cloud across the hills and mountains. Far west of the Midlands will also see clear skies this evening, but elsewhere it will be rather cloudy. The cloud will be thick enough in places to give some rain. Northern England, however, will see a dry and fine evening with any cloud and showers generally easing away. It will lead to a chilly start to the night, though with a frost quickly developing. There will be a few showers still in the north of Scotland. Otherwise, it will be dry and clear this evening, leading to a cold end to the day. It will also be chilly in Northern Ireland as the sunshine gives way to clear skies this evening. Winds will be light, leading to the odd fog patch forming. Overnight, we'll see the clearest and coldest weather in the north, whereas further south will be cloudier, but temperatures staying above freezing here. That's how the weather's shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
Thanks for joining us. This is a Saturday selection here on GB News. I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis. Coming up, senior Tory backbencher Edward Lee joins us shortly with the Ukrainian refugee crisis becoming more of a global concern by the hour.
But first, let's go through some of the top stories of the week with the help of celebrity chef and award-winning TV presenter Kevin Woodford. Kevin, what's caught your eye this week? There is only one story.
There is one story. You know, it's horrific. And it's hard to believe that one man is capable of such evil. It really is, you know. And I sit and I watch the news and it breaks my heart because I think if it was here and there was a no-fly zone, and I understand why there isn't a no-fly zone, obviously I do at this particular stage, how would I feel, you know, with my children if there were sort of, you know, gunships flying above me, you know, helicopters, and there were bombs raining down on me, and what everybody else was doing was putting sanctions out to try and help, but nothing else. So I really do understand why we don't have, why there isn't a no-fly zone. But part of me wishes there was, to be quite frank, you know, because I think at the end of the day, we're dealing with a really dangerous guy. If you look at his latest escapade to actually to throw rockets, at a nuclear plant, which is 10 times more powerful than the Chernobyl situation was. This is world devastation, if we don't deal with it. There are sort of glimmers of hope, aren't there? I mean, the president of Ukraine, for goodness sake, what a guy. From a comedian, to a leader like this is incredible. The Ukrainian people I admire enormously. And we've got situations. For example, I read that there's the second largest oil producer in Russia, which was founded by, obviously, one of our oligarchs, a billionaire, has actually suggested to Putin that he needs to stop this. Now, we need much more of that happening. We need to see the oligarchs really stepping up to this, and as much pressure as the West and the rest of us can place on Putin, the better. Maybe what we need is the generals to realise that it's them that's going to be in The Hague facing the war crimes.
I think President Zelensky's become an international hero, hasn't he?
Incredible.
The bravery of him being offered a safe passage out of the country.
Absolutely.
Lord Ashcroft did some polling of Ukrainians, which came out yesterday, and it showed that 92% of Ukrainians had a favourable view of President Zelensky and 66% a very favourable view of him. That's unbelievable for a leader of any country, isn't it?
I mean, we talk about, yes, he was a comedian, and yes, he worked on TV, and you say, cometh the hour, cometh the man. But looking a little bit more into his family and his family's history, his dad's a mathematician, his mum was an engineer for sort of many years, his granddad fought in the Red Army against the Nazis. So there is this very serious side to him. In fact, they call him the chameleon of politics, and they said he's now taken on his khaki colours, but, failing in the polls to now being, as he was before this attack by Russia, and he's now there staying with his people, saying the right words. And you will know as well as me, Kev, and you, Phil, we know comedians. They are wordsmiths. They do see things in a very different way. A lot of them are geniuses in their way. And isn't that what people need now? They need that craftsmanship, as it were, of the words, the support, and that bravery to stand there and be with them.
But talking about you, Kevin, about the no-fly zone, it goes to show how important NATO is, doesn't it? In all of this, I grew up. There was obviously the Cold War, but even to me, NATO, it didn't really seem as if it was that important. It was something we would belong to, and everyone said it was a good thing. But Ukraine, what's happening in Ukraine, you really see, the difference between those countries who are in NATO and those countries who aren't in NATO, and absolutely how vital that alliance is.
Absolutely. I wonder to what extent, perhaps, if when this was beginning, when we realised there was a problem about to really open up, whether or not at that point then a no-fly zone was established prior to Putin actually making the first move, whether that would have been sort of a preventative form for what's happening.
And then maybe another issue which you raised, Kevin, there was this attack on a nuclear plant. Should nuclear fallout come from that? Should it go into a country that is in NATO? Again, could that be something that triggers Article 5 being questioned today? And I looked and I thought, who on heaven's earth would attack a nuclear plant? And I thought, what messages is he sending there? Is this posturing on the absolute extreme? This is what I can do. I will take out down the world. Is he also saying there is a vulnerability there with nuclear power because I have all the gas and the oil? And I'm wondering how many subliminal message. So absolute fear, it is a psychological war. What is he saying to the world, and what is he also reiterating about his dominance in the gas and oil
Well, it also
field?
shows he doesn't care about the Russian people, because they'd be one of the worst affected by
Exactly.
it.
He does. You only have to look at the children, for goodness sake, that were laying flowers and protesting about, they were anti-war people. Kids, they were children behind bars. They were, and how crazy is that? And a complete shutdown on news now, BBC and all the rest of them, because there's a 15-year jail sentence if you say anything, if you mention the word war.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Because that would be fake news. Now, Philip, what have you?
Well, the story that caught my eye this week on a different tack, Kevin, was there's a new prison been opened in Northamptonshire, in Wellingborough. It's called HMP 5 Wells. and it's been hailed as the future of prisons.
Right.
Now, people might think it's a bit soft, so they call people there residents, not inmates.
Oh, right.
The cells are called rooms, they're all en suite.
No cells, oh really?
They're all en suite. Okay. They've got snooker tables, table tennis tables, sports pitches. I mean, the full works. Now, it actually reminded me, somebody was saying, yeah, this is how ridiculous this is, this newfangled thing of calling cells rooms. I can tell you this isn't new, because 15 years ago, I put in a parliamentary question to ask how many prisoners had keys to their own cells. The thing you've got to remember about all this, Kevin, is that I always say to people, whatever you think can't possibly happen is almost certainly happening, okay? And so I put in a question thinking, what's something in the justice system that couldn't possibly happen? Prisoners having keys to their own cells. So I put in a question, how many prisoners have got keys to their own cells? And the government came back and said they didn't know. So I did an FOI request to every prison in Yorkshire, right? And asked them. Now, as it happens, believe it or not, 2/3 of prisoners have got keys to their own cells, right? This is 15 years ago. 2/3 of prisoners have got keys to their own. You couldn't make this stuff up. But actually, during the course of this, the governor of the Young Offenders Institute at Wetherby left a message on my phone to say, I've just received your freedom of information request about how many prisoners have got keys to their own cells. He said, I just want to let you know that in our establishment, none of our prisoners, although we prefer to call them trainees, have got any keys to their cells, although we prefer to call them rooms, which I thought was rather gratuitous that we had to have this sort of lecture about. So, you know, here we go, Five Wells prison in Wellingborough, where prisoners are called residents and they have rooms, but I can tell everybody this is nothing new. This has been going on for donkey's years.
And what I can also tell you, Kevin, is Philip is forensic in his research into things, and when he doesn't get an answer, trust me, he is a demon in freedom of information there. And like he says, he likes to know what you wouldn't think was possibly happening is. So we will call that, I think we're going to have to do a new section just for you, believe it or not. And another thing, believe it or not, which came out is who was helping build this prison, Philip?
Yes, so the great bit is that the prison was partly designed by prisoners. And actually, the cells and everything apparently the design was done by convicted burglars.
Oh, that's
so I feel
give them the key.
They've got the key. They've got burglars designing it. You know, prisoners designing it. So, like I said, believe it or not. But just one quick story I'd like to touch upon because it didn't really get much news coverage. So it was in some reports, and it was in the BMA, and that was about mandatory vaccinations of NHS staff and care workers. And the government has now reversed that policy. Many of us were saying, I particularly was arguing it needed to be reversed. We were going to lose up to 100,000 NHS staff. We lost tens of thousands of care workers back in November. They did a consultation of 90,000 people, and that was health and social care professionals and the public. 96% of the public said it needed to be dropped, and overall 90% of everybody said it needed to be dropped. So what I say now is we need compensation for those care workers who lost their jobs. They were sacked back in November, and help getting back into work. This no jab, no job policy was a disgrace. The public thought it, but thank goodness the government has now turned on that.
Brilliant. Well done leading the campaign on that too.
Thank you, Kevin.
My pleasure.
Kevin Woodford.
Now, there are now well over 1 million refugees who've been forced to leave Ukraine, the vast majority heading to Poland and other countries in Eastern Europe.
But what obligations do Western nations like the UK have to take in their share of refugees? As the government constantly updates its policy towards people coming from Ukraine, there was one voice calling for caution. Let's hear what Sir Edward Lee, MP, had to say during a debate in the Commons earlier this week.
Sir Edward Lee. Everybody wants to be humanitarian, and we're under pressure, or she's under pressure, to have a visa-free scheme like the rest of Europe. But may I actually congratulate her on her proportionate response? I think we have to remember that unlike the rest of Europe, we have uniquely liberal labour laws and we speak English. So we are the country of choice for mass immigration. And therefore, I do urge her to as well as listen to all these humanitarian voices, listen to the voices of people, for instance, in Lincolnshire, where we feel we've done really our bit in terms of migration from Eastern Europe, where we're under extreme pressure in terms of housing and jobs. I know this is difficult to say, but we have to be honest about this. And may I therefore be a correcting voice in this and congratulate her on her humanitarian but proportionate response and not throwing away the immigration rulebook.
So does Edward Lee have a point? Let's ask the man himself. Edward, thanks for joining us on GB News. As this situation develops, has your position on this shifted at all?
No, I mean, I've been getting a lot of hate emails, as you might imagine, Philip, since then. Dozens and dozens of people who say that they have a very caring attitude but don't hesitate to misrepresent MPs when they make a reasonable and moderate point. I said that we've got to be humanitarian, but I made the point that we are the country of choice for mass migration because we have very liberal labour laws and we speak English. So I haven't changed my opinion at all. But I have stressed, of course, that I support the efforts of the government to have a sponsorship scheme and to allow relatives of those already here to come here. I think that's a very moderate position.
And Sir Edward, you know, what people need to appreciate and what you did there and what the Houses of Parliament's about and that debating chamber is to hear everybody's point of view, to hear what you've got to say, what your constituents have got to say. And sometimes people might not like it, but I always think you sharpen up your response, you sharpen up what you do, and you do much better policy if you listen to everybody. So even if you don't like what somebody said, you bringing those matters forward is important for our democracy.
Well, I think my job is to speak up for the silent majority. There are many people with small c conservative views who feel they're not represented in Parliament. It would have been very easy for me to join everybody else in that question time to Priti Patel, to criticise her, to say that we must open our doors, we must have a visa-free policy like the rest of Europe. But that is not practical politics. And all over the country, in my county, in your counties, our service is under extreme pressure. And therefore, we have to have, yes, a humanitarian approach, but a proportionate response. And that's why I think Priti Patel is an excellent Home Secretary. I think she understands this. She's not going to just open our doors to mass migration. That wouldn't help anyway. So I think that we're taking the right course. But you're right, Esther. If you actually try and go against the sort of liberal trend in Parliament, you do just receive a mass of hate mails. But that's not going to stop us from speaking out, because that's our job.
So, Edward, some people will say, well, look, you know, there's 1 million have gone over the border into Poland. We've seen Germans waiting at the railway station to take in people from Ukraine who have gone over the border there. That, you know, these people they're fleeing a brutal war. They're not people, you know, coming over in dinghies, scamming the system or anything like that. These are genuine refugees. And so, you know, shouldn't we really be giving some homes and refuge to people who are fleeing this brutal war?
Well, we are, Philip. We're going to probably allow in 200,000. I doubt it'll be 200,000. I think it might be more like 500,000. But put yourself in the position of somebody who is fleeing war from Ukraine, from Syria, from Iraq, from all over the world. You arrive in a safe country like Poland, you travel to France. You don't actually want to stay in France or Italy. In Italy, most firms are family run. Obviously, you don't speak Italian, you speak English, you can't get a job. Your country of choice is to come here. And therefore, if we listen to the voices of the Labour Party and had a visa-free scheme and said that everybody who arrives in Europe can come here, we would be simply overwhelmed. And therefore, I know this is difficult to say. I know it sounds, some people will say it's hard-hearted. It's not hard-hearted, actually. The sensible and right thing to do is to say that if you are a relative of somebody already here, if you're Ukrainian and you're a relative of somebody here, we will fast-track you and we will let you into our country. But I'm afraid at the moment we can't do more. It's a difficult thing to say, but that is the practicalities of it.
Sir Edward Lee, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. And I'd be interested to know what our viewers think, whether they agree with Edward's point. We'd love to hear from you at gbviews at gbnews.uk. I personally think he's got a fair point in that, we don't have enough houses for people who are already here in the country. And when you make an offer, you've got to be able to deliver on it. You can't just sort of have everybody coming in and you've got nowhere to go. So I think Edward's got a fair point.
A couple of things here, isn't it? Last night we've increased the scheme. It's not a year visa people will get now. If you've got families here, we've now increased that. It's going to be a 3-year visa, and it looks like we'll be processing applications, 6,000 applications a week. And I think also we need to take on board, we are supporting people coming from Afghanistan at the moment. We are still supporting people from Syria. We're supporting people coming over from Hong Kong. So I think Edward Lee was talking about that as well. We are helping people. But I think that connection with the family here, we do have to support people fleeing, bombs and destruction and war. So we want to hear from you. But coming up, we'll be live in Ukraine with the very latest.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. We've got some of your views, Phil.
Paul says prison should be a deterrent, not a hotel. When we treat prisoners better than the law-abiding populace, there is a problem.
And Gary says, I would like to see international arrest warrants issued for Puto and his billionaire friends around him until those decent world leaders stop sitting around tables with those potential despots. Then nothing will change. So keep your views coming in.
With so many major cities in Ukraine currently under siege from Russian forces, it's hard to conceive what life is like for the civilians who haven't been able to escape.
Let's speak to Yulia Osmolovska, a former Ukrainian diplomat and executive director of the Eastern European Security Institute, who is currently in Kyiv. Yulia, firstly, can I check that you are well and safe, and can you give us an update of what's been happening where you are?
Well, I'm relatively well and safe compared to those my colleagues who are right now stuck in the eastern cities of Ukraine. So there are some predictions, and I do rely here on the assessment of Christa Grozdy from Bellingcat, who said that till Sunday, Russians' ability to attack will be drawn up. But also, we do understand that listening to Russian claims, because they haven't still withdrawn the initial ultimatum, like Ukraine should get rid of its NATO and EU aspirations. We have to recognize Crimea as a Russian territory, and we have to recognize so-called independent republics in the east. So they're still trying to put this case forward in negotiations. That means they don't feel themselves being on a weak position. Therefore, there are assessments that conflict might last longer than just 3 days or 2 weeks.
What would you like to see the international community doing? Is there more that you think they should be doing to assist Ukraine?
Yes, they've done definitely much more than we had expected at the beginning, and especially before the invasion, because I think that eventually the Western partners had realized the real threat coming from Russia, and they understood that if they don't support Ukraine right now, so next in line would be some countries of Eastern Europe, like Poland and Baltics, because Putin also claimed that there are some disputable territorial issues with Poland and with Baltics. So it's definitely next logical step to expect from Russia. But on the other hand, the key issue right now, which we are asking for, it's a no-fly zone over Ukraine, because Russians being failed in their blitzkrieg campaign, they started just to do extermination war and the war to extinction. So they try just to shell the cities of Ukraine up to the very ruins for all the civilians not to survive in it. So it means that we definitely need the NATO partners to stay strong on this no-fly zone. And we know that today or tomorrow they will be voting in Congress on the same issue. And we also know that the general public worldwide supports no-fly zone over Ukraine. And listening to what you've been discussing a bit earlier than I appeared on your TV, I know that one of the psychological fears is that this would mean direct direction of NATO and Russia. But it has already happened in Ukrainian soil, because what Russians say, they say that it means that Russia in direct war with NATO countries, but they're fighting on Ukrainian soil.
Yulia Osmolovska, thank you so much for joining us. We wish you all the best. Stay safe, and we wish you and your fellow Ukrainians all the very best.
The NATO nations have rallied in response to the Ukrainian crisis, but has it gone far enough? And what about the role of the biggest member of NATO, the United States?
We're fortunate enough to be joined in the studio by Sir Christopher Mayer, former British ambassador to Washington, who also served as a diplomat in Moscow. So, Christopher, what have you made of President Biden's response to the situation in Ukraine so far?
Well, rhetorically, he's been extremely firm about all this. His Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has been equally firm. They've said all the right things. They have come back actually into a kind of leadership role now in NATO as the most powerful military and political nation in the organization. And I don't think we in Europe or in the United Kingdom can complain about the role the Americans have played. Now, if we go straight into, if you'll forgive me, into this question of a no-fly zone, a no-fly zone, even if we were to decide that this was the right thing to do politically and militarily, we couldn't do, because we don't have the resources and we don't have the aircraft to do it without the direct participation of the United States of America, because only they have the aerial resources to match those of Russia. So the next thing that we'll be looking at in Washington, we, the rest of the alliance, we here in London, is whether Biden and the White House will feel themselves so pushed by public pressure. And I'm not sure there's all that much indignation at the moment in the US compared with Europe about the way, the appalling way that the Russians are behaving, to actually push Congress to vote a resolution in favor of a no-fly zone. If that were to happen, I think it would result in a very, very serious debate inside NATO about whether we wish to cross this red line. I think that you can rely on President Biden and his staff, his Secretary of State and his Defense Secretary, to agree and to act on Article 5 of the NATO treaty, which, as you know, means if one member of the alliance is attacked, then all the others come to their assistance. And the only time in the history of NATO that this has been invoked was indeed at the time of 9/11, when the alliance said, we stand foursquare behind the United States and we'll act with the US against the terrorists, Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and all that. So I don't have any doubts about the American commitment. If a NATO ally, a member of NATO, benefits from Article 5, which of course Ukraine doesn't, because it's not a member of NATO, I have no doubt at all that, say, if one of the Baltic states were attacked by Russia, that the full force of NATO would not retaliate.
Following on from Philip's point there, do you think Biden has maybe been emboldened following the sort of chaotic departure from Afghanistan?
Putin emboldened?
No, I'm not. I'm talking about Biden being emboldened because he had such a chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. So rather than what you might have perceived a weak Biden, because of that, he's now going to be emboldened to do something if he needs to. And did you take comfort from his State of the Union speech?
Well, the State of the Union speech was, I think, a very, very eloquent speech. It was mainly about domestic policy and about 10 minutes on foreign policy and what he had to say about Ukraine and freedom versus tyranny and all that stuff. All that rhetoric was perfectly acceptable, perfectly normal, and actually quite well delivered, given that he has problems now with
except he did make a major faux pas, didn't he?
Yeah, he said Iran instead of, he said Iranian instead of Ukraine.
Well, that's a pretty major faux pas,
It's a huge faux pas, but you know, it's such a huge faux pas that you can kind of excuse it. If it had been something smaller, you might have thought, "Ooh, there's a Freudian slip there," but there was no Freudian slip. He just read his what's the thing called?
Fortitude.
Thank you. You use them all the time,
yes.
Or don't you? Maybe you don't. I don't know.
No, we do a combination. Yes, we do. I'm not denying that.
So I forgive him that. What was the question? I can't remember.
It was: is he now, because of that chaotic departure from Afghanistan, is he emboldened now to do something if need be?
Well, if you look at the withdrawal from Afghanistan, what you have to agree is that the policy decision to leave Afghanistan was the right thing to do. But the way in which it was executed, which involved us as well and other NATO allies, was a total shambles. I would argue that precisely because that was such a mess, the United States is quite determined now that come another big strategic decision, it'll get the detail right. But I think if you're Putin, and thank the Lord I'm not Putin, and you're sitting in your Kremlin bunker somewhere, and you're only talking to people if there's a 15-foot table between you and them, whether it's President Macron or your own staff, you do become a bit detached from reality. And I think the Russians, and Putin in particular, have completely misread or drawn exactly the wrong conclusion from the shambles of leaving Afghanistan. And the Russians should know, because they left Afghanistan in slightly better order, but they were defeated in the end by the Afghans. As were we in 3 wars, one in the 20th century, 2 in the 19th. Russians got beaten up. NATO then got beaten up, led by the Americans. We got nowhere at all in 20 years. And I believe, if I've got this right, Alexander the Great, whichever century that might have been, BC, got as far as Afghanistan and decided this is not for me and left. Although I think the town of Kandahar is named after Alexander.
I just wanted quickly just to ask if you could, what do you expect Putin to do? Do you expect him to stop at Ukraine, or do you think he'll want to try and recreate another mini Soviet Union with the countries that aren't in NATO? Well, just quickly, what would you?
Very good question. It depends what the outcome is in Ukraine. If it turns out horribly for the Russians, and it's kind of moving in that way, and they have to occupy with an army Ukraine and keep it pacified, they will not want to go off anywhere else. If it had been easier, then I think they would have started to look into, not at the Baltic states, because that's NATO, I think they would have started to interfere in the Western Balkans. in Serbia, Bosnia, around there, which is one of their traditional spheres of influence.
So, Christopher Mayer, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. So far, it seems Western sanctions have had little effect on persuading Russia to pause, let alone end its bloody campaign in Ukraine. So what impact are these sanctions having? And has the UK government gone far enough?
We can speak now to City Minister and Economic Secretary to the Treasury, John Glenn. John, thanks for joining us this morning. On sanctions, what has the government done so far, and what further plans do you have to increase sanctions on Russia and the supporters of the Putin regime?
Well, we moved pretty early and quickly with allies in the US and the EU to deal with some of the banks, to get alignment and exclusion from the SWIFT system. We've worked on stopping the Russian central bank use its foreign currency reserves to prop up the economy. And we saw an immediate impact in terms of about a third of the value of the ruble taken off almost overnight. Obviously, the Russian stock exchange hasn't been able to function. We've seen the London Stock Exchange delist about 30 companies. But we do recognise that there's more to be done. So next Monday in the House of Commons, we will be bringing forward the economic crime bill. And there are a number of measures in that which will make it easier to move more quickly. We'll streamline the legislation so that we can actually take that list of prescribed entities and individuals and move forward to actually delivering the sanctions. In normal times, that legal framework has lots of safeguards, but for the almost unique circumstances we face with what Putin is doing in the Ukraine, it's right that we bring forward that legislation so we can actually get to those individuals and get to that sanctioning moment without the same longer process that we have at the moment.
Many of my constituents have been in touch with me to say that they very much welcome what the government's been doing. We've just heard from a Ukraine diplomat saying that she thought that the international community had done more than they'd originally expected. But some of my constituents say that it seems that other countries in the EU seem to have gone faster at sanctioning particular Russian oligarchs and things like that. Is that true? Could we have gone faster to sanction particular individuals who are supporting the Putin regime?
Well, I think we've worked together with allies in many areas. It's important you do work together, otherwise you leave gaps where that money can go. I certainly recognise that this bill will be very welcome on Monday to move things forward, make it easier for the Foreign Office lawyers to do their work. But I don't accept that somehow we're significantly behind. We played a significant role in bringing the EU and the US together on SWIFT, for example, on the banking elements. But this legislation is urgent. We want to get it through on Monday. I'm sure. I hope we can get a cross-party agreement, and we will then be able to move forward more swiftly on that, on the specifics of individuals. But it is about, as I say, streamlining that legal process to make it a bit easier to move forward.
Set out how the damage that's happened to the Russian economy, the collapse in the currency and the rest of it. Many of our viewers might be interested to know what you assess the impact might be of these sanctions on our economy. What pain might we suffer from these sanctions?
Well, we look very carefully at that, and obviously there are implications to the wider energy market, which we're not directly dependent in the same way that some of our friends in Europe are. And obviously you'll have seen the impact on the prices, the future prices of some commodities like wheat. We recognise that there will be issues as we move forward. I mean, that's why on the cost of living crisis, you'll obviously know that the Chancellor brought forward last month a number of interventions to assist more generally. But obviously these things will develop over time, and partly it's difficult to be certain because we don't know, how long this invasion will last and how it will play out. But we're aware across the different departments of government, different commodities and different supplies that may be disrupted, and we look very carefully at that in every case and find alternatives where we can.
John Glenn, thank you very much for joining us this morning, because I know you've been working flat out, and to get emergency legislation through on Monday, I know what that takes as well, because we know how long legislation usually comes through. So thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.
Thank you both. Thanks very much. See you on Monday.
Ahead of International Women's Day next week, we wanted to speak to a truly inspirational woman. Someone has helped transform both business and show business in this country.
I'm Debbie Moore, founder and owner of one of the biggest and best-known dance centres in the world, Pineapple Dance Studios here in the heart of Covent Garden. I opened the business in 1979 when disco fever was at its height. I left grammar school in Manchester at the age of 15 with no qualifications and planned on being a typist. But winning a modelling competition thankfully changed all that. I moved to London, I modelled during the day, and I danced in a Covent Garden dance centre at night.
And then one day in 1978, it was noticed they were closing. It was terrible, but suddenly I thought, here's an opportunity. And so I found an old pineapple warehouse, and that's why it's called Pineapple. And I just say, thank God it wasn't a banana warehouse.
Debbie Moore, OBE, the founder of Pineapple Dance Studios, not Banana Dance Studios, but Pineapple Dance Studios and clothing range. The first woman to launch a PLC on the London Stock Exchange is here with us in the studio now. So, Debbie, I'm so glad that we had this opportunity to look at your incredible career. And did you always want to go into business? Was that what you always wanted to do?
No, of course not. I sometimes I think I'm a total imposter, really. Being the first woman to go public. I mean, it took a girl a model from Manchester with a dance studio. It just didn't seem right somehow, but it happened. And the main reason that I did that was because I was getting lots of dancers from America, from New York City Ballet. All wanted a pineapple in New York. And I said, surely you've got one bigger and better. But they hadn't. They really hadn't got an open dance centre. So that was the reason. I'd borrowed enough by this time from the bank. And so that's the reason I went public, was to open in New York and to expand the clothing side.
And then you sort of opened back up this dance studio that other people didn't think would work. So what was it about you that was determined to make Pineapple work, a dance studio work in London?
I think that, you know, if we just go back a little bit, when I was modelling and I married a photographer, you know, the cliche. We were the, you know, Shrimpton and Bailey of the North. And we even did a programme called Model Couple. And anyway, one day, when I got married at 19, and when I was 21, he ran off with a 17-year-old. And it broke my heart, totally. And I piled on weight. This sort of shock, heartbreak made me have an underactive thyroid. I put all this weight on and was going to be on drugs for the rest of, you know, thyroxine and side effects and everything. So then I found a doctor, a homeopathic doctor, who said that he'd cure me. And so then he said, and weaned me off the drugs and said, the best way to lose weight is dancing. It's the finest form of exercise. Every muscle in your body, it's uplifting. And so he said, find a dance class. It wasn't easy, but there was a broken down dance studio. And this is in the 70s. And I used to go and do Arlene Phillips' class with my mate, Lorraine Chase. And off we went. And suddenly it closed down. One Monday, there was a notice said closing Friday. So this was my light bulb moment. So I rushed and got all the teachers' phone numbers, and we got a petition going to try and keep it open. And then just across the road, and by this time, Covent Garden was derelict because the whole fruit and market and the fruit and flower and veg had moved out. So there were all these empty warehouses, and that's, as I say, it was an old derelict Pineapple warehouse, so we started. And I wanted to not have a small broken, I wanted a big place so that everyone could come to totally break down those elitist barriers that were around dance and make it accessible to everyone, which is what it is, from 3 to 103 and all.
So what I want to get right is this. So this brute who ran away with a 17-year-old, you were 21, he ran away, you then put weight on, and out of that awful occurrence, you then set up this business, become a multi-millionairess. Have you ever gone back to this chap and said, thank you for running off with a younger woman, you've made me a millionaire, you've made me a top businesswoman?
I actually say, thank you, Rosemary.
Oh, is that the lady's name?
And she worked in the pub in Altrincham. Just, you know, a northern thing.
So Esther mentioned, Debbie, about the fact that, you know, you were a female first in many respects, and certainly listing your company on the stock exchange in a man's world. I just wondered who were your role models? Who were your inspiration at the time that made you realise that, you know, I can do this?
The thing is that I was on a mission. You know, there was such a need. There was nowhere now to do a dance class, and I realised how important dance is for your health as well as everything else. And plus, it was the beginning of MTV, of music videos. It was the beginning of shows coming on.
Can I just point out here, yes, that you on the London Stock Exchange, first woman there to float a company, and I believe in that photo next to you is Nigel Farage's father.
Dad, yes. Yeah. The first time I met Nigel, he sort of gave me a hug, and I said, oh, hi. So he said, I've grown up with you in my kitchen. I said, really? So he said, this picture was on the kitchen wall. You know, so he's obviously, you know, younger than me then. That's what he was saying. You know, when he was a little boy, he used to look at
But what you did, and this is what's incredible, and this is why I want to say, what is it, the vision you have? Because yes, there was the 80s, there was dance, there was fame, there was then everybody coming into your studios, whether it was people making music videos, whether it was the West End, whether it was the ballet, everybody coming in. But then dancers were saying, oh, we don't really like our dance clothes, they're not as trendy as they should be. And you were instrumental in bringing in Lycra, changing the whole sort of dancewear and then making it dance streetwear.
Yeah, exactly. So it was nylon, and it was nylon PK, and it was in school uniform colours, you know, leotards in sort of brown and green and maroon, and so I thought, well, instead of this stretchy nylon, you know, what if we get cotton with Lycra? And so I went to DuPont, and they were looking for something to do with Lycra because they'd been using it in corsetry. And so we developed cotton Lycra, and they sent me footage. And so then I made leotards and what were called footless tights, we now call them leggings. And then I thought, well, this is nice for a little skirt. And how wouldn't it be great as a dress? And so it began. We were the first people to use Lycra in outerwear, and of course it's in men's suits. Probably got a bit in yours.
No, he's got the leggings on underneath, Debbie.
Hey, well,
underneath this desk.
Promise not to tell anybody. Promise not to tell
it's a pair of
about
leggings,
that,
and he loves doing high kicks. But you know, got an honorary degree for all the work you did in this field, for sort of just changing, as I said, the look of the 80s.
Well, it was so I got an honorary master's degree, and it was for really pioneering and kind of revolutionising the way women dressed. And so instead of, you know, skirts with zips and blouse, it was, you know, suddenly this new way to dress. And it was all at the same time of all this happening at the beginning of the 80s. So the timing was all in the success, really.
And you are your pioneer. You say that word yourself. You know, you've won that prestigious Veuve Clicquot Award. You've got an OBE from the Queen. You do support women in business significantly. And you wrote a book, How to Support People, and then I read that it was actually redone for the Chinese community and Chinese women. So around the world you've been helping people. But can you explain what it is that you've got to be an entrepreneur?
I mean, it's a sort of overused word in many ways. You know, I just think I was brought up in Manchester, and you know, my dad was a plumber. My mum, you know, worked in a mail order company. There was a great work ethic. You know, I always had a Saturday job. I was usherette in Hale Cinema in the holidays, and I worked in the Wimpy Bar in Stretford, and so I just had a kind of work ethic in me, and then I you know, it was quite hard work modelling. I went all over the world, and I did, you know, mail order catalogues as well as TV commercials and things. But I don't know really. I just think I was always busy, and then I saw this moment, and I had such respect for how hard dancers work.
But is it looking at the need? Is it looking at a need and then giving a response, giving an answer, and then seeing it through?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have I just said it then? Is that what it is?
Well done. Yeah, you know me better than I know.
But it's 40 years, isn't it, this year? It's a big year for you this year.
It's 44 years since I signed the lease for Pineapple, but I went public in 1982, so that's 40 years since I did.
Well, I can say one of the most inspirational business women who has carried on being at the front of transformation and change. And I know in lockdown, you put Pineapple online, again, at the cutting edge of what was happening. And that is why she's one of the most successful business people in the country.
And that was Laura, though, I have to say.
And
Laura worked very hard to do that, you know, and she's a wheelchair user, and it's very, very difficult for her to have done anything in Pineapple, but to get all these online classes going when we were in lockdown so people could still keep dancing, and all the children
and Lana also is an absolute pioneer for people with disabilities.
Yes, she is.
Well, Debbie, thank you so much for coming in. International Women's Day next Tuesday. Thank you so much.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry and clear for many away from from eastern and central England. Let's take a look at those details. Zooming into the southwest, and it will be a fine end to the day. It will turn chilly, though, once the sun goes down as skies remain clear. Moving east, and it will be a cloudy and damp evening across southeast England and East Anglia. Winds will be brisk, especially along the coast. We move back into the clear skies across Wales this evening, with just a little cloud across the hills and mountains. Far west of the Midlands will also see clear skies this evening, but elsewhere it will be rather cloudy. The cloud will be thick enough in places to give some rain. Northern England, however, will see a dry and fine evening with any cloud and showers generally easing away. It will lead to a chilly start to the night, though with a frost quickly developing. There will be a few showers still in the north of Scotland. Otherwise, it will be dry and clear this evening, leading to a cold end to the day. It will also be chilly in Northern Ireland as the sunshine gives way to clear skies this evening. Winds will be light, leading to the odd fog patch forming. Overnight, we'll see the clearest and coldest weather in the north, whereas further south will be cloudier, but temperatures staying above freezing here. That's how the weather's shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the